remember the day exactly. It was March 30th, 2007, 9:30 p.m. in my son's bedroom when he collapsed to the floor. To the ER we went, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, a psychiatrist called us into the conference room. I think your son has schizophrenia.
When I was a teenager back in 1950s, my mother started acting very strangely. It eventually became clear that she had paranoid schizophrenia.
When he was about 3, I noticed something was wrong with him. He wasn't socializing.
I first learned of my daughter's illness, my 10-year-old, when she was 3. Teachers would frequently tell me she often became overwhelmed or would hide under the tables.
He went away to college, far away from home, and even when he returned home Thanksgiving freshman year, he seemed dark, moody, and different.
It was a Thursday night in January. He was a senior in college, straight-A student, ready to graduate.
It was one of my children, and I could see symptoms starting to manifest. Early on, I wasn't really sure what it was or how to pinpoint it.
I first realized I had a mental illness when I was 10 years old. I was diagnosed with ADHD. A year later, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, and then a year later, I was diagnosed with a major depressive disorder.
The absolute worst day in my loved one's illness was having a police officer come to my door and tell me that my child was threatening suicide.
The worst day was without a doubt when he was 16 on the psychiatric ward, and one day he did something that was against the rules, and he was restrained and put onto a stretcher, face down, confined with his hands, and they called me, and I went in and I saw him like that. And the pain was unbelievable. And it just still, all these years later, 20 years later, it still pains me to think about it. And I went over to him, and he was really thirsty, and I got some orange juice with a straw, and I fed it to him through the straw.
He would just take off. Middle of the night, you get these phone calls and all kinds of things were going on. Always on edge.
She took a knife to the electric wires and the television and the whole house, and she ended up in the state mental institution.
After a karate class, I had felt my performance was very poor in it, so as a form of self-punishment, I cut my arm.
For 2 years, different hospitals, we went through this almost a whole day of waiting for my son to be well enough to sign his name. The nurse came and she asked him if he was ready to sign for them to talk to his mother, and he said yes. They gave him the paper and he signed his name, and a few minutes later the nurse came storming back into the room, and she found no humor in the fact that my son had signed Sinbad the Sailor.
Having a mentally ill child has affected all of my relationships. It did cause a rift between my husband and me. It did put too much of a strain on our marriage, and the marriage broke up.
It has certainly narrowed our networks. It has taken us out of the regular stream of life because we are so preoccupied. My daughter and my son, who were quite close growing up, they fell out. They became estranged. I think partly because my daughter feared the illness.
He was in denial that anything was going on. It was us, the family, et cetera, his parents. It's very complex. The whole family changes and reacts in many different ways. You're always on edge.
It's a big financial commitment, and it's a time commitment to have to run around to all these appointments. Every month we spend hundreds of dollars on, even with medical coverage, on mental health treatments.
No more exercise, no more going out, no more having fun.
The anxiety is particularly the worst. It's cost me years of learning in school. It cost me jobs. It cost me my childhood. It cost me relationships.
There have been some very tragic stories of some families' loved ones getting cuffed, getting beaten down.
Today, the 2 police officers charged with the death of Kelly Thomas, a 37-year-old schizophrenic homeless man.
Mental illness in your urban areas and in your community of colors is criminalized. We have a lot of men and women who are struggling with mental illness who end up in prison.
If anybody found out my son wasn't going to school, they'd say, just pick him up and put him on the bus. And the psychiatrist said, if you did that, they would find him in a bathroom hanging.
You sometimes feel like you don't fit in, or people looking at us like we're different.
I saw a billboard once and said, you never tell someone with cancer to just get over it. So I tell someone with depression the same thing.
People who read newspaper articles about someone doing violent acts, that stigma is real and that stigma is powerful. And I think it keeps people from getting treatment, it keeps people from being well.
I like to think of myself as a man of faith, but this really shook my faith to the utter core. So there have been quiet nights by myself in the backyard where I sort of shake my fist skyward and I ask, my God, why has this happened? What is the purpose that I do not understand? That you have put this heavy burden on my son.
I feel like if it hadn't been for NAMI, I don't know what would have happened to me. Meeting with so many great people who really understand what it's like has made all the difference in the world.
I'm very excited to be able to share our story and also help educate other people, and also hopefully through NAMI become involved in programs to bring families together.
It helps families to live and families to understand, families to nurture and help.
Going to the meetings, talking to other people, mainly realizing that you're not alone with it.
Did a lot of reading and joined NAMI. And now I can tell anybody my story.
My biggest hope for her is that people can appreciate all the wonderful things about her.
My goal is if I can help just one other person come to beat their mental illness or to help them understand what mental illness is, and it'd be worth going all through. It'd be worth going through all that.
I just would like him to get treatment, adequate treatment, get his illness under management, be independent, and be a really nice person, and maybe reach out to others.
So I dream now for my son to have a fulfilling life in recovery in whatever way he would define for himself.
You never, ever, ever give up hope, ever.